Yo, what's up, YouTube? So, episode 2 of the Sensible Show, or whatever I'm calling this. Gonna get right to it. Today, real simple. We're gonna go over adjustment of cantilever brakes, and I'm gonna give you a quick little, just a little tour of where I'm working at and what I have going on. So, I just moved back to New Jersey, and kind of resetting up shop here, and I took some time today to set up my little tool cart here. So nothing too fancy, but you know, sometimes it's fun to look at this stuff. I'll pull out a drawer and you can just see, wow, so nice and organized. And then, you know, underneath I have some stuff as well. I want to go and organize, you know, the stuff that's in these bags, but nice and fun. I'd kind of been waiting to do that for a while. Okay, let's get right into it. So here we have a Focus Maris CX cyclocross bike. It is a older bike. The frame is great, very light. You know, it has great geometry. The bike suffers from one major flaw, and that is extreme brake shudder. And so I want to address setting up cantilever brakes to eliminate brake shudder. If you have brake shudder, you know how terrible it is. Essentially, it feels, you know, like the bike is just bucking as you hit the brakes. But there's other symptoms that are essentially the same thing. You might be getting terrible brake squeal. That's, you know, a similar setup. And it all has to do with setting up cantilever brakes, which is kind of a pain in the ass. In fact, I'm just going to go and let you know that setting up canties, it really sucks. And, you know, the fact that modern bikes and cross bikes have switched over to disc, it's way better, not only in braking power, but in setup. But let's just get right into it so that you can adjust your canties so that you don't have these symptoms. Now, what I will say is that there's different types of cantilever brakes. You know, with just traditional canties like this, there's old and new styles, but there are, you know, what they call linear pull brakes or V brakes. This setup really has to do more with the traditional canti, straddle cable, that kind of thing. There are canti brakes that suck more than these, okay? You can see I'm using V-brake pads. V-brake pads are, you know, they bolt on, they have conical washers. Post-mount canti kind of just adds another aspect of setup difficulty that fortunately we're not gonna have to deal with here today. But it's the same thing, and I'm gonna address some things so that if you were dealing with that, you could, you know, you could deal with it. First off, take a look at the actual cantilever arm itself, okay? On this, it forms a 90-degree angle, right? You might be looking at your canties going, mine aren't like that, especially if you have a newer cyclocross bike. Very possibly you have canties where the arm angle is more like this, right? It's less than 90 degrees. And the overall geometry we're going for is different, but when you have those types of brakes, the straddle cable is going to look very different. And I'm going to tell you why. So ideally, when you depress the brakes, there will be a 90-degree angle between this arm and the straddle cable. On the old-fashioned style, like what you see here, the straddle cable has to be essentially infinitely long to get a 90-degree angle. I mean, that straddle cable could even be longer because you can kind of see, if you got a good eye, that that's slightly less than 90, but I'm kind of running out of room here. This is not what the setup would look like if you have the new style. So if you have the new style where the arms are like this, and I call it the new style because that really just kind of is what it is. It's the newer style of canti. You're going to get a 90-degree angle with a much shorter straddle cable length. And Whereas on this old style of Canti, you essentially can't make the straddle cable long enough. On the new style of Canti, you essentially can't make the straddle cable short enough. And I mean, you can, because you'll run into issues with not being able to unbolt it, the piece here being way too close to the tire, but that's what you're looking for. So no matter what type of cantilever brake you have, 90-degree angle here when pressed. Now, if you have the post mount style pads or, you know, cantilever arms, the thing you are having to control for is the distance. You know, the pad essentially now can slide in and out here. And so what you now need to control for, and this is why it just adds an extra element of shit to the already, shit show of setting these brakes up, is you want, you know, when we're looking at this arm, you want this ideally to be like, the word I'm looking for here is parallel. When the pad engages, the pad would come off this arm at a 90-degree angle, and then again, we would be trying to get a 90-degree angle here to here when depressed. All you can do on the V-brake pads is change the big spacer or the little conical spacer. You either put the little on the inside or the big one on the inside, sorry. I put the big ones on the inside here, and I got as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. The mathematics behind this setup is if you go over 90-degree angle, which isn't really possible here, but again, if I had the newer style, it would be. If I ran this length straddle cable with the new style, you know, the angle would be well over 90. You lose power exponential. I mean, like for every millimeter longer the cable, for every extra bit over 90, you lose a ton and a ton and a ton of braking power. And so you really don't want to go over 90. If you go less than 90, you're still going to have power. So, and really that's the problem of having less than 90 is only an issue on this old style. And if I had a bike with newer style cantilever brakes, I'd show you, but maybe just kind of listen to what I'm saying and you'll kind of get a gist. So that's the idea here though. You want the brake as strong as you can make it at the angles. So at the cable, you want the brake as strong as you can make it. And you get that strength by hitting these 90-degree angles. Unfortunately, if you just run a cantilever brake at full power, meaning you get the right straddle cable length, you get all these angles set up, and you go to brake, it's too powerful. And you get what's happening with this bike. Brake shudder, you'll get extreme squealing, all kinds of nonsense. So you need to scrub power, not at the cable, but at the pads. The way you do that is with toe. What I mean by toe is the angle of the pad here. So you can see how, and I mean, I can tell in this picture, I think you can too, the pad is not hitting the rim, you know, perfectly flat. It's hitting it like we're, what would that be? Like we're landing the space shuttle. You know, like an airplane lands ass first and the space shuttle lands nose first. So we are landing these brake pads like the space shuttle, nose first. You can reverse toe. It's a case-by-case situation. It really is. You know, sometimes with V-brakes, you got to do the reverse toe, which is landing it like an airplane. So what I mean by that, because I know that's confusing, is instead of making the pad come, like I'll exaggerate it, hit it like this, which is the way it's set up now, you might have to make it so that it lands, you know, butt first. But essentially you need to put toe. And what that does is it weakens the brake performance. The most powerful would be for the pad to hit the rim nice and flat. But by adding toe, you weaken the brake pad, which allows the brake to not fully lock up the wheel, to cause the shudder. And it's all a matter of the amount of toe. You can't go crazy. You can't toe it so much that, you know, only a tiny portion of the pad touches the rim. But, you need to have some. Again, ideally, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to put any, but if you want to eliminate shudder, squeal, all kinds of nonsense, that's what you have to do. How do you do that in practice? Well, it's going to take some practice, but you'll start by getting the pads onto the arms themselves and finger tight, and you kind of have to go right, left, or left, right, just so that you tighten them and you start with that perfectly flat contact, right? And what we're looking for is when the pad touches the rim. Let's see if you can see it in the picture. You see the pads, how do you say that? I think I've been using parallel and perpendicular wrong this whole video. But you want it to be nice and flat, like the pads go into the rim nice and flat. And you kind of have to go backwards and forward, back and forth to get that set up like that. You'll take your tool, 3-way is the best, and tighten this. So you've got one hand holding the brake down. You've got it adjusted. It's not touching the tire. It's not dipping too far below the brake surface. You use your tool, you use a 3-way. It's really the best because you can one hand handle the tool the best. You tighten it finger tight, and then with the tool, you can kind of bend, with it just that little bit tight, you can now bend the whole situation a little bit back, and then you'll hold it with your other hand, tighten it. I know teaching you how to do this completely without showing you is kind of pointless, but wow, really kind of just left you on a cliffhanger there. Anyway, this is a clip that I had recorded earlier in the day, and it was such a rambling heap of nonsense. I just deleted the whole video. But I'm going to do more of these, different bikes, different procedures. Stay tuned.